have you in. I am excited that you would consider clicking on that podcast show and inviting me into your car, into your living room, into your wherever maybe you do business from, and hopefully not on company time, but we sure do appreciate you tuning in, listening to the show. My name's Lane Cromwell. I'm with the CSC, or Cromwell Sports Chronicles, and just consider it a privilege to have you click and listen. So if you don't know or haven't heard of us, we are a newer show. We focus on sports stories and how that affects us as people, and something that I consider just absolutely loving every time I get to hop on and do a show. I would invite you to go back to some of our shows. We've had Clinton Okamoto on, who's a USC and a Laker fan, serves in our National Guard. Mike McDonough, who's a former BYU basketball recruit, college coach, and currently runs the Utah Ball Out Skills Academy. And then we just last week had Brandon Benyon on, who is a cyclist, or a cyclist who is an enthusiast about cycling. And if you haven't heard about our show, go Cromwell Sports Chronicles, either on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and you can look at us there. But again, I really appreciate you listening, and thanks for making time for me today. To be honest, I don't really want to talk today or in this episode about COVID-19, about the U.S. government. It's not because I'm trying to ignore it, but to be honest with you, I think you tune in, I should say, turn into us, but tune in. You want to get away, even if it's just for 20, 30 minutes, and just think about sports, or maybe hear some fun stories. And I want to try to help you accomplish that. However, if I can help you enhance your ability to become a little bit more aware, so you can maybe deal with frustrating things that are going on that we're dealing with, or you're dealing with right now, I want to pass along hope. I want to pass along that you can do it. I want to pass along positive vibes. And if it's just one person, I think it's worth it. Again, we're not going to get too deep into those things at all. Know that there are sports stories right around the corner for our show today, but I wanted to, as I said, and I want to say it was our very first podcast, I like the idea of pulling back the curtain. I don't mind sharing who I am. And just a year or two ago, I was running a business. It was an insurance business, and I thought it might be prudent to try a life coach. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was a great decision. His name is Tony Child. Go to Facebook. You'll find him at Elevated Life. Highly recommend doing that. And, if I can just plug one quick thing, if you have ever considered a life coach, a therapist, anybody that can make you better, this is a good thing. We don't need to be afraid of seeking help, especially right now. Life is stressful. It's just crazy, and we should get all the help we can. And more importantly, we should make time for it. But if there is something wrong with our body, we run to the doctor. If there's something wrong with our car, we run to the mechanic. But sometimes, and maybe men a little more than women in particular, we fear reaching out for help if it's something about us, if it's something about our brain. Maybe we're aware, maybe we're not aware, but other people are aware. Don't be afraid to go see somebody, ask for help. I'm a huge advocate, and just wanted to throw that out. I know it's not easy from experience at first. I thought, a life coach, that's weird. But I'm telling you, isn't it great when your body or your car, you get in it, or you wake up and it's just like, man, things are working how they're supposed to work. Well, imagine waking up and feeling like your mind or your body or whatever it is working the way that it was intended to. So I'll leave it at that. But in getting back to Tony Child, I want to tell you one of the very first things that he taught me. The very first idea that he had me actually think about every day for a week was a simple phrase. And it's this simple. He says, "You don't know what you don't know." And maybe you're saying the same thing that I did when I heard that. I was just like, that was brilliant. Sarcastically, right? Wink, wink. That's brilliant. You don't know what you don't know. All right, thanks, Tony. That's great. But as I marinated on that, and I use that word a lot, marinate, think about, I started really getting deep into that, just that phrase of, you know what, I don't know what I don't know. And the more I research, the more I start thinking about myself, about what I want out of life, my job, my family, my wife, whatever it might be. The more I started really deeply thinking about those things, it's had an impact in the last couple of years. It's been hard too. So I'm not going to say it's hard, but you don't know what you don't know. And that to me is a little bit of a setup for what I want to talk about today. And this I can promise you, regardless of what situation you are in, we are in, whether it's COVID, loss of job, doesn't matter. Maybe you have kids that are struggling. Maybe you're struggling. There are two things that are going to happen no matter what when it comes to experiences with people. And these are the two things. Number one, 5% makes all the difference. 5% makes all the difference. And number two, structure and culture can help maintain or destroy anything in its path. Now, I'm sure you've got a puzzled look on your face like, what in the darnation is he talking about? Well, let me tell you the number one, 5% makes all the difference. From the ages of 19 to 21, I lived in and around the Mississippi, Louisiana area. And at the time of this experience that I want to share with you, I was living in a place called the Iberville, Mississippi, just right off the coast, just a stone's throw from a place called Biloxi. A lot more people are familiar with Biloxi, but just a stone's throw from there. A guy I was rooming with, his brother, was actually coming in from out of town to watch a buddy of his play like a AAA baseball game or something like that. But he called his brother up, who was my roommate, and said, "Hey, let me take you guys out to dinner." I'm sure he knew we were starving and would never turn down a free meal, which I was more than happy to accept. But I remember sitting in this restaurant, and it was lighthearted conversation. It was fun. And all of a sudden, my roommate's brother just kind of stopped for a moment. It was almost like something overtook him a little bit. His posture changed. He was very serious. And he said something that I haven't forgotten. To be honest with you, in a small degree, it changed my life. And he said, very in simplistic terms, he just said, "Let me pass on some advice." He said, whether it's in business, family, church organizations, sports, ran through a few things. He said 5% is a really important number. I remember leaning over the restaurant table where we were, and I said, totally engaged, I just like, how come? How come 5% is an important number? And he says 90% of people in life, they do good jobs. They show up, they do what's required, but 5% are the difference makers. He said there are 5% of people in society that are going to take the ship down, or you have the 5% of the people who will always do the heavy lifting and they'll get it done. And then he stopped, let me chew on it for a minute, and then he said, be the latter. Be the person who gets it done. Be the 5%, the good 5%. So how does that relate to sports? Well, is I've had a few moments where this moment of these things have kind of come together as I've thought back on some sports memories. And uh, I don't pick out necessarily these teams or colleges because I think they're bad. It was, or good for that matter. But these sports moments just exemplify kind of these things I'm discussing. So growing up, I was a pretty big BYU fan. Um, that's probably an understatement, but I wasn't crazy. I was just more of really into it and really a fan. But I remember when it was probably about 2002, which puts me in probably the mid to late 20s of my life. I went to a basketball game in Provo. I was cheering for BYU, and there was some commotion during the game, and I was kind of up towards the top. I guess maybe not the top, but somewhere between the middle to 3/4 of the way up. And I remember some commotion down in the student section. And after they had stopped the game, some things happened. I see the police escorting a Utah fan up. Now, for those who don't know, I mean, my wife is a huge Michigan fan, and she knows the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. And I think even she would admit, having been out here in Utah for 20 years, Utah BYU, when they were in the same conference in its heyday, it was nasty, it was crazy, it was nuts, and it was everything to everybody in this state. So I'll just preface it with everything was intense and it was personal. So, but I remember as the police escorted up this student, he was a Utah fan in BYU, the Marriott Center in BYU's home court. So as they walked him up, something happened that I had never experienced, I had never felt, and it changed me. As the police escorted out this Utah fan, they walk through a portal, and over the portal are some BYU fans. And I remember being down the row from them, and this lady opens a water bottle and dumps it on this Utah fan as he's walking out. And it just so happened that the police had to turn back, so he totally missed it. But I remember in that moment seeing that, I was deflated, I was hurt as a fan, I was mad. And that is the first time I have almost lost it. I remember I was with a girl that I had asked out to go on to a date to this game. And needless to say, I think she maybe saw a side of me that probably wasn't too good to show on a date. But I ripped into this lady and everybody around her. I remember yelling at her saying, "That's not how we do it here. That's not how you be a good fan. I don't care who he's for. You don't treat people like that." And it really ruined the rest of the game for me. I wasn't into it. I didn't cheer. I was in shock. But then something happened. Because again, going back to awareness, I wasn't aware that fans acted like that. Every game prior up to that, I either hadn't been around it or had placed myself to where I just didn't see it. But I had never seen that before, and it really, really got to me. But as I was driving home, the experience that I had came back to me. The story of the 5%. And a couple of thoughts went through my mind. It was, are you going to let this lady and her choice take down the ship? Are you going to let her ruin your experience as a fan? And that is the question I would pose to you. As a sports fan, as a dad, as a mom, what experiences are you having that are ruining other things because of people outside of your circle of trust, people outside of your circle of influence? Well, let me tell you the other side. There's always another side. I remember, I want to say in 2002, I had some friends who were living in Ohio. They invited me to come out. We drove to Indiana to a BYU Notre Dame football game. Um, and like I said, I had had a lot of great sports experiences, but this was actually the first time I think I'd ever really gone outside of the state of Utah. I'd ever really gone to a game where I was old enough to really understand that I was the opposing fan as opposed to the home fan. And so I remember it was rainy, it was a little gloomy, it was overcast, and it was unbelievable what happened. I have never had an experience like I had at Notre Dame. I remember getting out of the car, and before we had gone from the car and had even approached the stadium, we had been offered food from Notre Dame fans. We had been offered, hey, would you like to throw the football around by Notre Dame fans? It was unbelievable. And I'm hitting on point number two, the structure and the culture that even the fans had put in place to make it a fantastic experience. It was so interesting because it felt like there was almost this unseen accountability between Notre Dame fans. It had nothing to do with whether it was BYU, anybody that came to town. I was convinced from that one experience that people that go to Notre Dame, more than not, they're having a great experience because of what's required from the fans themselves. And to top it off, it was the first opposing game I had ever been to. At the end of the game, BYU lost the game, but to hear the Notre Dame, the Irish band, go out onto the field and play the BYU fight song, it blew me away. It put the cherry on top. It was unbelievable. Great experience. Let me tell you one other really neat experience that I had. Um, it was probably about 1987. That would put me at about 10 years old. I remember being in the car and hearing a radio broadcast of the San Francisco Giants. And something just piqued my interest, and ever since then, I've been a San Francisco Giants fan. I remember the first time I saw Will Clark at the plate. If anybody remembers him from a while ago, he had this look like you had just stolen his girlfriend or said something wrong about his mother when he was batting. It was just unbelievable. I still remember if you go on Google, you just type in Kevin Mitchell catch, and you'll see him in the outfield, and he's running, and all of a sudden you just see him put his hand without the glove up, and he catches a ball. It was unbelievable, and they had me. So in 2014, San Francisco Giants, they had a new stadium at this time. I don't remember if it was still AT&T Park or Oracle Park, or they've changed the name a few times. But my wife and I decided we were going to go to, it was Game 3 of the 2014 National League Championship Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. And it was like Christmas. It was like being a kid all over again, just walking around, having the whole experience. And can I just make a side note? Let me just make a side note here, story within the story. When I go to a sporting event, at this game, like I said, it was Giants Cardinals. When I get behind somebody 2 rows up, there's a kid probably in his early 20s, and he's wearing a Kansas City Royals blue shirt. I get it. If you want to be a fan, that's great. It truly is great. But you're going to spend money to go watch a game, put on orange, put on red. It's a playoff game. I just never understood. If that's you, maybe, call into the show, help me understand why it is you would spend money as a Royals fan going to a Giants Cardinals game and wearing your Royals gear. I've never understood that. So anyway, back on track. We're at this game, and the whole experience to me is it was phenomenal. The way people talked to us, treated us, I can't tell you how many times during that game, I would move around a little bit, go down, get some food, and people would just say, "Where are you from?" And we would just talk. It just felt like I had a whole family there. It was unbelievable. But here was really kind of the funny experience. It goes into the bottom of the 10th, and we are sitting next to this guy who has probably been served more alcohol than he can handle. And I'm not a drinker at all, and my wife isn't a drinker. But it's so funny how sports brings us together when the pitcher for the Cardinals in the bottom of the 10th runs over to pick up the ball. All he has to do is to throw it to first because San Francisco has a runner on third. Well, he overthrows the pass, the throw to first. The Giants guy comes home. We win the game. Well, I'm in just a beautiful moment. I'm hugging my wife. And all of a sudden, I realize there's a third member of our hug. And it was this, I'll say, very unsober San Francisco Giants fan. And you know what? In those moments, you just say, it's okay. It's okay. It was fun. We're all in this together. We did it together. And it was a really funny moment. And I really equated him. The only thing I could really think of was if you're an NCAA fan, a basketball fan, if you go back and watch when the NC State Wolfpack beat Houston, I want to say it was about 1983, the NCAA championship, you see the coach for NC State running around. Come to find out later, he's just looking for somebody to hug. He wanted somebody to hug. And I think that's what this Giants fan was doing. He was so excited. He's just like, I don't care who it is. I don't care how off my rocker I am. I've got to find somebody to hug, because he was at least aware enough of the moment. So, folks, let me just leave you with this, okay? We've talked about the 5%. We've talked about structure and culture. And to me, Notre Dame and the San Francisco Giants have it down to a T. But I'll leave you with this. No matter what happens, we have choices every day. And once we become aware of what we're doing and things around us, or maybe I should say more aware, we again have a choice. It doesn't matter if it's COVID-19, if it's Black Lives Matter, if it's personal trauma, marriage, family, sports. We have a choice, and like my experiences at Notre Dame and at San Francisco, we can contribute to the structure and culture that already exists and help everyone have a great experience, or we can be the 5% that usually make it on the news and have a negative impact. And I'm going to tell you what my roommate's brother told me. Will you be the difference? Will you be that 5%? Please do. Be the 5% that does the heavy lifting, that passes on the tradition, that makes things better for the person that comes next. Love your family. Love your community. Love your country. We can do this. We can get through this. We can be that 5% that does it all. And when you do, when you make the choice to be that positive 5%, you're going to realize just how easy it is. And it's actually is the intro and the outro to our show. It says it in the song. Be the 5% and you can catch your dreams. I appreciate you. Stay safe and you take care. We're gonna chase it.
Catch it by the tail, throw it into a cage and make it our own. Yeah, yeah, just got one shot, we're gonna take it, gonna shoot down